It is my pleasure to say that this episode is sponsored by the Cancer Box, a monthly subscription filled with life-giving products that have been meticulously researched and sourced and shipped right to a cancer fighter's doorstep. Rachel and Jameson, founders of the Cancer Box, work closely with doctors to continuously research and gather the highest quality set of vitamins and supplements possible. Rachel was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer in her 20s, and they have put in the hard work to walk a healing journey. Their experience is packaged up and placed in each Cancer Box sent. Visit www.thecancerbox.com to learn more. And I can tell you that after researching what they are doing and the concept of what they're doing, this is really something that you'd like to avail yourself of.
I sail an ocean, unsettled ocean, through restful waters and deep commotion, often frightened, unenlightened. Sail on, sail on, sailor.
Hello, I'm Dr. Gary Onik, your host for Cancer is Tough, but You Are Tougher. I want to thank the Beach Boys for allowing us to use their music, which is dear to my heart. This podcast is uniquely personal. I am both a cancer specialist as well as a cancer survivor. It's a rare person who isn't touched by cancer in some way or another. Let this podcast be an encouraging resource and ultimately bring you hope.
Stop the crying and the lying and the sighing and my dying. Sail on, sail on, sailor.
So today we have with us on our podcast John Tesh, who really needs no introduction for most people, but I'm going to give him an introduction anyway. It's a great honor to have you with us. You're probably the most well-known guest we've ever had, and so
for people over 50, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that now in the supermarket. Now it's not, oh, it's John Tesh. It's like, oh, my great grandmother likes you.
Well, you just have to start doing some rapping. That's all.
Yeah, I've done it. It didn't work.
So, our podcast is a little bit different. We're about cancer, but we're not about particular treatments or things like that. We're really talking about the cancer journey, and we're trying to give patients, some hope, some guidance on how that journey can take place, and to ease their way on it. Because as we both know, being cancer patients, it can be a fairly bumpy road. As background, for the past 45 years, John Tesh has been internationally recognized as a journalist, composer, broadcaster, and concert pianist. His Intelligence for Life radio show currently airs on 350 stations and reaches 14 million people each week. I calculated that, John, and you have 13,999,090 more listeners than I do.
It's nice to know you've still got some nerd in you. That's great.
Yes, but so I'm on my way. So just watch your back, okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So he's had a highly successful, varied career path. Also includes 6 years as correspondent for CBS News, 10-year run as anchor on Entertainment Tonight, broadcast host, music composer, and induction into the National Radio Hall of Fame. He's written a book in 2020, which was published, the name of which is Relentless, Unleashing a Life of Purpose, Grit, and Faith, which details his journey healing from aggressive prostate cancer. He's also just launched a new 24/7 streaming platform, Tesh TV, that provides nonstop curated programming featuring transformative self-help, inspiration, and healing content. So, with that introduction gone,
That's enough of that.
That's enough of that. God, I mean, it's like your mother paid me to write that.
Or it's like I just graduated from an ADD conservatory. So everything is interesting.
So I'm a little got a little trepidation. I'm a neophyte, obviously, at doing this, and I'm talking to one of the interviewing greats, so that if I step on it a little bit, just cut me some slack. Okay.
Can I tell you a quick story
Sure.
before we get started? Who was the guy that did Nightline? Oh my gosh, this is terrible. Ted Koppel.
Yes.
So I was doing an interview with Ted Koppel. It was like an hour-long interview for NBC. I had an interview show along with the Entertainment Tonight thing I was doing, and you talk about a guy who's interviewed everybody, right? And who's just a killer, as an interviewer. And I had all these notes. I had this legal pad and everything, and I'm sitting across from him, and I'm asking, and about an hour into the interview, I figured I'd gotten enough, and I'm like, "Well, Mr. Koppel, do you have any notes for me? Any advice for me on how to do an interview?" And he goes, "Don't do what you've been doing for the last hour." I'm like, oh dear, And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he goes, "You shouldn't write down all these notes." I said, "Well, you could have told me earlier." So,
well, I might as well, throw it away. But everybody when they're starting out has to have a little bit, I guess, of a crutch. Our careers have been very, very similar where our stories are really similar in a lot of ways.
Yes, I agree.
We both had a cancer that was said to be incurable. We both turned to faith to heal ourselves. And in a strange way, we're both composers. You have music and I in the medical world trying to compose treatments for people.
Absolutely.
So it's we've got some interesting parallels.
The difference is one is great for a dinner party, the other one saves lives. So I'm the dinner party guy.
Well, no, seriously, by the things you do, the books you've written, the inspiration you give to people on a daily basis, you're saving lives too. We've just been given different jobs. That's all.
Yeah,
sure. And as we know, it's not about us. It's about
Absolutely.
something divine working through us. So, in that way, I think I've seen you. I know you've got a humbleness about you, even though you're so successful. And we have to feel the same way, even though sometimes we do something that's really cool. Yeah. Can you bring me back to that day? I mean, life's going great.
Yeah.
Kids are terrific. Wonderful wife. You've got this wonderful career. And then all of a sudden, it changes.
Yeah, and there are people who are listening, watching this, who know this experience, and other people, of course, who have been in the room with that person who gets that. The interesting thing is that my wife Connie Sellecca, she through this whole thing, she's just been an amazing advocate, and there are millions of them around the world who know how difficult this is. It's and in many ways, I've said this to her too, that it can be, certainly this disease can be worse for the spouse than it is for the person who is actually getting the treatment, because there's just so much to juggle. And it was in that was true in this case. We were Connie's mom had been sick. She'd had a fall. She was in her 90s, and so we had basically moved to Palm Springs. She was in an urgent care situation and a trauma center, and so we had moved there. And so we were there for months and months, being with her as she recovered. And I missed a doctor, and this happened, of course, during COVID, right? A lot of people missed doctor's appointments, and this is what happened to me. So I ended up being a year behind my general general practitioner exam. A guy named Dr. Steve Galen in Los Angeles, and so it was time to catch up. And I went in, And did blood work and everything was was fine, and it came time for the physical exam, and he looked at my PSA results, and of course that's the measure of what's going on in your prostate. Everybody knows that, but it was it was right around 0.4, 0.5, and that's what it had been for 5 or 6 years. So basically, no inflammation, nothing going on there. And so, but he said, well, let's do the digital rectal exam. And for people, there are people who actually like, what is that a digital thing? No, it's your finger, right? So that's the thing. That's the thing. It's a digit, right? And so, right.
Oh, if it only could be
right, exactly.
digital.
And it's a little uncomfortable for the patient, and sometimes it's uncomfortable for the doctor. And I come to find out now that there are doctors that and patients who make a decision together that, well, the PSA is fine, let's not worry about let's not put you in this uncomfortable situation, bent over. And so this guy is, he's that guy. He's like, no, we're doing this. And so, and then while he's doing the exam, he says, he didn't say "uh-oh," which is the worst thing you can hear a doctor say. He goes, John, something's very different right now, which is pretty much the doctor equivalent of "uh-oh." And I said, and so he finishes the exam and he goes, I want you to go see a urologist. And so fast forward through that, and your urologist goes, yeah, it's just, things are just not as smooth as they were. And I don't know how Steve caught this, but I see what he's talking about. It's very subtle is the word he used. And so, and then we went to the sonogram, and this is 2015. And of course, the sonographer is never going to tell you anything, right? You got to wait for that result. And that result sent me to another doctor where I had a biopsy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, And so and the biopsy results came out, and and this was my introduction to the word Gleason, right? Yeah. So the measure of the virility of the tumors in your body, and so I had the doctor called us in and said I had 6-7 tumors, and I'm like, whoa. And he said, well, first of all, the prostate gland is multifocal. I didn't know what that meant, but it usually produces more than one tumor. But I had 3 Gleason 9s, and so I'd hit the jackpot, 9 out of 10. And so the conversation we had with the doctor was so weird, and I won't even mention his name, but he basically told my wife that we should get our affairs in order. And
that's a hopeful message.
Yeah, right. So to answer your question, thanks. Yeah. So to answer your question, it was like, I use the example in my book of I used to play lacrosse, and there's a thing where if you get blind, if you have the lacrosse ball, pretty much anybody can do anything to you. You're right. You're live. And being blindsided by somebody running at 30 miles an hour while you have a ball and knocked down, there's that high-pitched squeal that you hear in your brain when you're just inches away from a concussion. And that was the sound that I heard. I recognized that sound. I'm like, why am I hearing this sound? And sure enough, it was like, well, this is the end for you. You get your affairs in order. And so for I guess a week or so, it was just emergency time. Everybody was crying, including me. And it was like, how did this happen, right? So it was just, there wasn't, we didn't even think about prayer at that moment because it was just such a blow. Because like you said, things were going really well. And I know people know this feeling. And so once we picked ourselves up, it was, you mentioned my background. A lot of my background is spent in research departments, whether it was CBS News or local news stations or even CBS Sports doing the Olympic Games, where I just said, okay, we got to go right to the research. And so Connie and I just went crazy, just trying to find stuff. And I landed on this book by Dr. Patrick Walsh, who was one of the pioneers of prostate cancer treatment, I guess. And he wrote a book called Surviving Prostate Cancer. And so I devoured this book twice. And on the second read, I realized there wasn't any mention of Gleason 9s. It was all like Gleason 6s and 7s. And so I said, well, I mean, that must be how serious this disease is. And so I did what I do. I got the number for Johns Hopkins, which is where he was. And I cold called him. I got all the way down to his, and this is so me, by the way. I got all the way down to his assistant, and I said, this is John Tesh, and I'm a journalist, and I'm looking to have a conversation, an interview with Dr. Walsh. And she goes, well, Dr. Walsh is in today, but he doesn't do interviews really. And and I said, oh, okay. Well, can you just mention that I'm on the phone? He goes, well, he only comes in on Thursdays because he's partially retired, but let me just see if he can talk to you. And so she puts him on the phone, and I introduced myself, and I started asking him about prostate cancer. And about, I don't know, about 3 minutes into the interview, right, he goes, John, it sounds like you're a journalist who has prostate cancer. And I said, yeah, yes, sir. I'm really sorry. And so I said, can you operate on me? Can you save me? And he goes, I'm not operating anymore. And my my heart sunk. And he said, but there's a guy that I trained, Dr. Ted Shaeffer, who treats aggressive prostate cancer aggressively. And so I was on my way to Johns Hopkins.
Did you feel that your choice? Well, first off, was your choice in a way guided uh, by some spirituality aspect? And was it important for you to have a doctor that believed in God? I mean, it's a
It's a great
question
question.
that I ask because uh, do you want your plumber to believe in God? No, you want a guy who fixes your pipes the best, I guess. But
Yeah.
but did looking back, did it make any would it made any difference at all for you?
No, not at that point. And that's a really great question. And it's something that people will have to consider with it, with any decision on disease and treatment. I mean, it's it. I'm, I always wished I was had Navy SEAL training, because a lot of the stuff that I like to read and listen to every day is about Navy SEALs and how they behave and missions and stuff like that. And so when and I watch all those movies and all those television series and everything, and with a Navy SEAL team, it's basically, here's the mission, boom, get in there, and if it's like that, if it's like within the 5 hours, do you have time to even know to know the background of this or that or whatever? Yeah, I mean, eventually you do, but you're just all about the mission, right? And so that's really what this was. And also, Connie and I both had grown up as Christian and lived in the word Christians and lived in the Word of God. And she was a Catholic, and I grew up Methodist, but we had not discovered the power of certain scriptures in the Bible that promise the healing power of God. And scriptures like 11:23, which I have tattooed on my arm, which we can talk about in a minute. So the decision, by your question, the decision was based totally on just the quality of the doctor and his experience. How many? I just wanted to get the cancer out of my body, and I know a lot of people who have a result like this from a biopsy. That's it. And so let me just get this out. Let me have an operation. And,
Yeah,
and we have people who will call us now because of the book and because of interviews and stuff, and say, where should I have the surgery? I said, wait a second, maybe you shouldn't have surgery. You know what I mean? That kind of
yeah.
thing. So
Oh, absolutely.
because it's, I'm sure you have those discussions all the time with people, because now the treatments even since 2015, they're much different. So no, we didn't have that conversation about. It turns out he is a faithful guy, but that didn't start until the cancer came back, and at the same time, I had discovered these teachings about divine healing, and I've always believed, there are some people who get into it. Well, this is uncomfortable to talk about, because there are some churches actually that teach you should never go to a doctor. You should just believe on Mark 11:23. Whatever you say to your mountain, believe that it'll be removed, and it will be so, as long as you believe in your heart. Whatever you pray, believe that you already receive it, and you will have it. But there, you have to decide what you have faith for. So at that point, we had faith for the doctors, but down the road, we had faith for the doctors, and also what God had promised for healing in the Bible. The two of them working together.
Well,
But yeah,
cancer is always cancer treatment. The paradigm is always multiple modalities.
yes,
Uh,
perfect.
so you don't want to say, well, this is the only thing I'm going
Yep,
to have.
yep,
And the wonderful thing about I mean, every tumor, every cancer type is really specific. And so each one has different chemotherapy drugs that work for it and different parameters. But the one thing that you can add to any cancer regimen is prayer.
Yeah.
And you know, I saw as a cancer doctor my whole career, I saw miracles. I saw miracles where people did choose just to pray, and I don't um, suggest that in any way, shape, or form. I think it should be multimodality. But one patient had a prayer chain that went around the world from his church. He decided not to have any treatment at that point. He wasn't curable. He was just going to have palliative chemotherapy, and so his decision wasn't unreasonable. Uh, and he came back, no tumor, no tumor for 5 years.
Right.
And I was an empiricist. Okay, if you can't touch it, feel it, measure it, it didn't exist. And so I was kind of a atheistic scientist at that point. And looking at that, I could have said, no, that doesn't, that doesn't compute. So I'm going to leave it alone. But that opened my eyes, and that's where my journey, my faith journey, started.
Right.
Very much like your cancer journey started. You had the faith
Yeah.
already. I had the
Right.
cancer stuff.
Right.
And it's interesting that we've kind of ended up in the same place with
Yeah.
different paths.
Yeah, I think the most powerful scripture that I landed on through all of it was Proverbs 18:21. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. And so when I saw that, I mean, yeah, I'd read that scripture before, but I read it in the context of trying to get well. I started studying what does science say about the power of words, and there's a lot, as you know, there's a lot written about the quantum field and what happens to particles, what happens to waves in your body when you speak positivity, when you speak life, when you pray out loud, what that does to to what's going on in your body, and as I discovered that, I, there was a time when I became a cancer patient, and I know this happens to people because I've met them. I've met them in concerts. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll go out and we'll do a concert, and as at the end of the show, I'll share a little bit of my testimony, and then we'll play a song, and we'll go, hey, if you want to have a conversation, I'll be in. This was before COVID. Now it's coming back. We'll be in the lobby. My family and I will be in the lobby, and we can have a conversation with you. And those sometimes go on for 2 hours, right? But that's that thing where I was I could get anything I wanted because I was I guess technically what they told me I was a terminal cancer patient. It was always going to come back, and so I kept doing my job and everything, but sadly I started drinking scotch. I could get Vicodin because I was having some pains everywhere, and I got to the point in this studio. I got to the point, I guess it was maybe 3-4 years ago, where I went toe to toe with my wife Connie, who of course was in the journey with me, and she just said, "That's it. I've had enough." And I said, "What do you mean you've had enough?" And I was half high, and she said, "You're killing yourself. So I'm not going to work on it anymore. If you don't want to live, then there's not much I can do about it." And she walked out of the room, and it was a watershed moment for me because I realized I had just lost, you know, a big part of my cancer treatment, and I had just destroyed my marriage at the same time. And the reason for that was that my wife had learned how to speak life over me and over the situation. She didn't even refer to it as my cancer; it was the cancer. But I became a cancer patient. I talk about this in the Relentless book, where I would tell people about my treatments. I couldn't wait to tell them about my treatments, and we'd have dinner parties, every now and then. I'd talk about, yeah, well, I just had this biopsy, and it's people don't want to hear that, right? And certainly your heart,
Sure.
as a man believes in his heart, so is he. Well, I believed in my heart that I was a cancer patient, and so I discovered the power of words at that point, and understood that I needed to speak life over myself every day.
So tell me about the is that the scripture that is on your arm?
Mark 11:23 is on my arm, which is that there was a 2017 when the cancer had come back, the prostate cancer had come back, it was in my lymph nodes, and I'd had a lymph node salvage, and I'd had a bunch of biopsies. I think I have like a punch card for biopsies. My next one is free. So I'm that guy, right?
You're the guy
But
that your cup is hanging on the wall on a hook.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
on it.
exactly. Yeah, just wash it out and I'll be fine. So the guys at MD Anderson, who I would love to talk about in a minute, but they just said, we should probably talk about radiation. So I went to a hospital here in Los Angeles, and we had a meeting with the doctor, and it's I actually talk about this in the play. It's easier when when you sit down and you write it down, but I took my wife and my son Gib, who was like 37 at the time, to this meeting, the radiation oncology meeting, and and it was like it was in the sub basement, and I'm like, why are we so far underground? And Gib, my son, goes, it's because they don't want any of the radiation to get out. That's why. So we go underground, and we're in the waiting room, and I mean, this sounds terrible, but it looked like it looked like one of those post-apocalyptic films where, I mean, everybody had tattoos like on their necks and on their stomachs and on their pelvises, and burn. I mean, it looked like burn marks. Everybody was grossly underweight, and here I am. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this my new world? We had the meeting with the doctor, and when the doctor said, yeah, we're going to do a 3D basically circular a treatment all the way around your pelvis, and we'll just irradiate that. And I used the word. He didn't use the word carpet bombing, but I did. Around your pelvis, and you should know that you could lose bowel function, bladder function, and when he got to one of the functions that I was really fond of in that area, Connie and I my wife and I looked at each other, and we're like, I think we're gonna
Yes.
we're gonna stand on Mark 11:23 for a little while. Mark 11:23 is whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will be done, shall have whatever he says. Therefore, whatever you ask when you pray, believe that you already receive it, and you will have it. And so we just started speaking to our mountain, which was the disease that was in my body.
It's I was when I was diagnosed. I know you had a very special cancer, and I don't know exactly what it is, but I can guess because you weren't making PSA. So, my cancer, my PSA was 137,
Wow.
and because
And
my
let me ask
cancer,
you let me ask
yeah.
you a question. How different is that being a physician than it would be for me as a patient who has no knowledge?
Well, I diagnosed my own cancer because I scheduled a CT scan, and the CT scan was finished, and so I went back there to the computer with the
Right.
radiologist who was
Right
there,
around the corner, right?
right
Yeah.
around the corner, and
Right.
the films keep coming up on the screen. Starting from your legs,
Wow.
going up, and I went, well, exactly like you did. Oh, well, that's not good. Wasn't hearing it from somebody else. I mean, the radiologist wasn't saying a thing because he knew that I saw it.
Yeah.
That I was getting the gist of the
Wow.
fact that
Wow.
I
Wow.
was done. I was going
Wow.
to die. There was no, I mean, and you're looking at it right there. You're saying,
Right. Oh.
boy, I tell you, it's in my bones. I can see it in my bones. I
Oh
can see it in
gosh.
my pelvis. Got this huge mass in my pelvis pushing my bladder to the side. Um, Lymph nodes everywhere that were positive. I mean, not just in the pelvis. I mean, everywhere.
Oh
Uh,
gosh.
so I mean, I made the diagnosis, and I remember that feeling. You heard a screech. Well, I just had my stomach, uh, hit the floor.
Right. And you're
Uh,
alone with somebody you probably didn't even know that well, right?
yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know him that
Yeah.
well. I mean, I mean, he felt so. I mean,
Oh.
he felt so uncomfortable
Yeah.
because, what do you say to a guy? I
Yeah.
mean, you're going to die, and I was offered that treatment. I mean, you were looking at the radiation, going, all of those things you're going to lose. Uh, the only thing for me was castration.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
was my only treatment. It wasn't going to help you, so
You mean you mean chemical castration?
well, physical or chemical. I
Oh,
mean,
wow. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Some
Right.
patients actually have physical castration.
Yeah.
Uh, Usually not anymore. But one of my
And
patients,
explain
yeah.
to people why that is as far as the hormone goes.
Well, these cancers, prostate cancer in particular, is hormone dependent. It needs testosterone to grow. So they found out back in the early 60s that if you castrated somebody, it would help their prostate cancer and it would involute and go away. Unfortunately,
It just for a moment, it's like
yeah.
who first did that, right? It's like, let's try this. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
I mean,
oh, you mean I'm not in the control group? What happened? Anyway, I know
exactly.
it
Exactly.
gets dark and funny at times. I know.
Well, and one of my questions for you was when did humor come into your world
I'll tell you
in
that later
this?
because it's
Yeah,
pretty funny. But go ahead.
yeah. So they said, the only treatment for it is castration, and I just basically said, that is not compatible with my life.
Hmm.
It's not just obvious sex life. I mean, all the things I love to do are physical,
Yeah.
climbing. I mean, those are the things, and I'm a vital guy. I work out, and I love it, and I just said I'm not going to do that. And by then, I was lucky because I had a faith. By then, I knew there was a God. I knew there was a better place than this earth.
Right.
I already knew that um, I was an instrument in 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 His hands, doing things for people, and so in very short order, I mean, literally in hours, I had made my decision, and I was good with it. And I said, okay, well, now what am I going to do? I'm not just going to sit here and die.
Right.
I'm going to do marshal what I can. And I already knew that prayer was an integral part of what I wanted to do. So we went out and we made a 90-minute video, a full length video asking for prayers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we called it, AKA Dr. Hope, because that was my moniker given to me by some of my patients. And we chronicled my career with the various treatments that I had pioneered. And then we came to the end of the part one, and I said, but I'm here because I'm now one of my patients,
Right. Wow.
and I need you to pray for me.
Right.
It's I've got a mission here. I've got something very, very special to give the world. Uh, and I need to have the time to do it.
Well, and you mentioned something too about people who are consuming this right now, having some sort of whatever it is that works for you, having some sort of a strong action plan, and even writing it down or making a video or whatever. It really changes everything because then you're just not letting things happen to you every day. You have a reason to get up in the morning. You have your why, and so were you taking? Yeah,
Now you're interviewing
it was
me. Wait a
eventually
second.
going to happen.
Wait, you switched it.
Yeah, I was going to say it was eventually going to
No,
happen.
no.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's great because I think what I wanted was to have a conversation with you, not to
Right,
interview you.
right, right.
So
Well, I mean,
okay,
I'm
so ask.
interested at this point. I'm really interested in. So you have all these people praying for you, and what kind of treatment were you taking?
Well, I had a treatment that I knew was already curing metastatic prostate cancer, and I was the only person in the world who knew how to do it. Uh, and it involved making a vaccine out of a patient's own tumor and then having the patient's body react to that, their immune system going around and
Right,
killing the cancer wherever it was. And so I'd been doing it for 5 years already, and I had a good experience with it. I had definitely cured patients with terminal metastatic prostate cancer already, but I was the only guy who knew how to do it in the world. And so I said, I'm going to take prayer and I'm going to do my own treatment. and I didn't have anybody to do it because it's actually a procedure. So I called up one of my friends, who I knew for a long time, old buddy at Harvard, who I knew could do the treatment, but he didn't know how. So basically, I said, David, you're going to do the procedure, and I'm going to be awake while
Oh boy.
you're doing the procedure, and I'm going to guide you. I'll have a screen, and I'm going to guide you to do the procedure. And he's
This is like a doctor who has a cannonball wound in the Civil War or something, talking one of the riflemen into taking the. That's crazy.
yeah. Well, and he had the appropriate answer, which was, "You're out of your mind."
Okay, yeah. I think I just said that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, we got it all together and we filmed it, and it later became part of part two, where I
Right.
was going to show my results, whatever the results were. And I was given a miracle. In 6 weeks, I had no evidence of cancer anywhere,
That's amazing.
and I reached my 3-year cancer-free anniversary, and but I knew. You see, I knew that I had this, and I knew that I needed time to bring it forward, because this treats all cancers. That's the strange and very, very different thing about it. There hasn't been a cancer that hasn't responded to this.
Right.
Pancreatic cancer does, and a number of other cancers that are, always known to be incurable. So, uh, but I knew, my son Al is autistic, and when I told him about what was going on, he said, uh, Dad, I'm in his flat way. He said, Dad, I'm crushed. And
Wow.
and I said, Al, there's no reason that you have to be crushed, because we know why this is happening. It's God is here to prove a point. And I know that he wouldn't let go of me until this mission that I have is over. And every day Al would would text, "How are you doing today, Dad?" And so it was really wonderful when I could call him up and said, it happened. I've got more time, and the time was given to me so I could get this project across the finish line.
Right.
And every
And
once in a while, oh,
this
go ahead. I'm
treatment's
sorry.
this treatment's available for people right now, right?
Yeah. What we're trying to do is, I mean, we don't have an advertise it or anything. People come to us from other patients, and now there are some things on the web, and so people are finding us. Um, the real thing that I have to do is I have to get it across the finish line with the FDA, and we've
Uh-huh.
got some trials going on that we're working toward, and so that this can be more widely. Right now, patients have to pay for it, and
Right.
it's very expensive because drugs are incredibly expensive. So because it's not paid for, so and we of course jigger around anything we can to get the people who need to get treated, but it's hard because my resources are limited, so I can't pay for everybody. I mean, I can
Right.
give up my fee, but I can't
Right.
cover the cost of their medications and stuff. So
So for people who have a prostate prostate cancer diagnosis right now, can you talk a little bit about, because I'm always telling people, and it sounds sort of weird. I said, well, I don't use the word best, but I have a slow growing cancer. Is prostate cancer always slow growing?
oh, no, no. And as you've seen, uh, prostate cancer is a spectrum of diseases. It's not just one disease, and the Gleason score really tells you, what the aggressiveness of your cancer is, and how it needs to be treated. Now I've changed my views completely on how the aggressive cancers have to be treated.
Hmm.
Um, most people say, I want to get it out. Let me get it out.
Right.
And so, they go to the surgery. But prostate cancer surgery is not very good surgery because almost 25% of the time they leave cancer behind.
Right.
And that's called a positive margin. And you just can't tell that you're cutting through the cancer, and you only find out about it later. And it, then the patient goes on to radiation and hormone therapy and all of those things that you were trying to avoid, and they've had the radical prostatectomy on top of it. So now I believe that we've got excellent ways to kill aggressive cancers extremely reliably without having to take the whole prostate out. And one of the advantages is you can always retreat a patient. So if it does recur locally, you can retreat it. And looking over the last 10 years, when we published an article on our results, what we saw was that low, medium, and high risk patients all had the same results, 90%. And I was just talking to one of the guys that I trained to do this almost 15 years ago, and he said, I still do it because everybody, high risk, low, everybody gets 90% success. And I said, wow, that's great, because it wasn't just in my hands. It's now being reproduced by the guys out there who I trained.
Right.
So no, it's as a good doctor, I have to be willing to change my concepts when evidence shows up. And so now, I think everybody, with particularly the high risk patients, should get a focal therapy if needed. Just kill the cancer, leave the rest of the gland. We can do that now, just like a female lumpectomy for her breast. Right. We now have proven that focal therapy for prostate is a viable alternative. That took us 20 years to get acceptance on that. Slow. Things change very, very slowly. And you had said that you had something that I might have had a hand in. You had some treatment that I might have had a hand in.
Yes, I mean, just recently, you may know the name Dr. Christopher Logothetis. Dr. Logothetis is the head of oncology at MD Anderson in Houston, and we discovered him after surgery and some lymph node stuff for oncological treatment, and so I had originally had the androgen deprivation therapy, which you speak of, which is for those who really want the nitty gritty, and they basically give you a shot of something called Lupron in your or Degarelix in your abdomen once every 4 or 6 weeks, something like that, and it just sucks all of the testosterone out of your body, and as you were saying, I had chemo too, and I hated the ADT more than the chemo because I am also a vital human, and I'm always surrounded by a way to exercise, and also I love performing live, and so I had no energy. I lost too much weight. I just looked terrible. But the idea was to subtract all the testosterone so that my aggressive prostate cancer couldn't sniff that out. Now things have, to your point, now things have changed, and I've witnessed those treatments change, over just the 7-year path that I've had in my journey. And so Logothetis he's very much into treating my lifestyle and not the cancer. So and his point is there are some doctors, surgeons out there who just say, let's just get the cancer out, let's just treat the cancer, let's kill the cancer. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden the patient's over here and he looks like somebody who was burned in a horrible fire,
Yep.
And so exactly the way your regimen is, yep. I believe. So they through some scans, an FDG scan and also PSMA scan, which are for people who it's basically a PET scans. So they found some lymph nodes that lit up, and so the doctor said, there's an interventional radiologist here at MD Anderson who does radio frequency ablation and also cryoablation, and we'd like for you to try cryoablation. So they went into, again, it was like 3-4 weeks ago. They went into my pelvis, and they biopsied those lymph nodes, and then right on the spot, as you guys do, they found out that yes, there was cancer cells in there. So with that probe, with apparently a like a frozen bubble on the end of it, they touched, they killed 4 or 5 spots in the lymph node chain right there in my pelvis. So that was, and when I was hearing about, and then the next thing they're talking to me about is actually an injection that it sounds like it's similar to what you're talking about, what you've invented, basically, where it sniffs out the cancer and then treats it locally.
That's yes. Yep.
Yeah.
It's exactly, when I was a young man in 1982, I had the idea to freeze cancer like that. And that went to liver cancer, and then eventually to prostate cancer, and then to RF and all the other ways you can kill cancer. And so I guess that was my first hit record.
Right.
That was my
right.
That was the first time I made it onto the charts.
Yeah. Well, and I think the big news here now is because, and the reason I keep stopping to interview you is that what I have playing in my head is, if it was May 25th, 2015, and I had just gotten those results from the biopsy, I was absorbed. I was just absorbed. There weren't many podcasts about, if any, about prostate cancer. There wasn't much, online, and there was Dr. Walsh's book, which was outdated. And by the way, he told me that that he needed to redo the book because now they do treat Gleason 9s. But for people who are listening to this podcast right now, what the takeaway for me, if I was listening to it, is that surgery isn't it's the nuclear option, right? Because that's what you think about first. But there are other, you got to do your research, and that's when the advocacy comes in. And when I talk about my wife Connie, whether it was Dr. Shaeffer or the guys at MD Anderson, when we would have these meetings with them, whether it was on Zoom or in person, one of the surgeons and one of the oncologists said to her at some point, "Are you in the medical field?" to my wife, and it was a good question, because she had, she knew all the modalities, she had taken all the notes. When you get to a certain point, and that's why we said to both Shaeffer and Logothetis and this other surgeon friend of ours, Dr. Brian Chapin, we said, hey, if there are couples who are struggling right now with decisions, please just give them our number. And so that's happened throughout the years. And again, people have shown up in concerts, because when you have a disease like this, as you know, and I'm speaking, the obvious to you, but for people who are listening, when you have a disease in I call it the engine room, right? It becomes a couple's disease. It becomes a couple's journey.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
Things, whether you're going to have surgery or, back in the day, they gutted you from stem to stern, and then you were basically neutered. Now they call that surgery, quote unquote, nerve sparing surgery, right? Because it's very important to spare those nerves. And what you're doing right now, it does that. But I've seen relationships crater, because and even relationships with pancreatic cancer have done the same thing, right? But it's I think the danger is, when you get a diagnosis, is that a lot of people are like, well, we'll just go in and we'll get this fixed, and then boom, it's over, And so the thing that really helped me, I have to tell you, was, it seems an odd fit, but I've reread through this journey. I've read maybe 3 times on different segments of my journey. I've reread Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he was a Holocaust survivor. And the whole book is about the nature of suffering. And so I really, during this whole time, I studied suffering, and I started listening to podcasts from Jordan Peterson, for example. Of
course,
the great philosopher and psychologist, and reading things like The Road Less Traveled, which is all about life is difficult and suffering, and because if you can't embrace, my true belief is, if you can't understand what suffering is, that God really doesn't want you to suffer. There are a lot of people who believe that, well, God put this on me, so if it's his will, I'll survive. I don't believe that. I believe that when Jesus went to the cross, that he not only took our sins, but he took our griefs and sorrows. He also took our sicknesses. And so that promise is there for us to run our course. And look what happened to you, because you pulled your bootstraps up, didn't feel sorry for yourself, didn't start saying goodbye to everyone, said, okay, here's my action plan. You're going to be able to live out your course.
Oh, gosh. Can I just ask you one more question? And you've been so gracious with your time.
Oh, can I just tell you about? You asked about?
I was asking you about humor.
About humor, yeah. So this was what happened for me was that I and this is really important for people who are listening, because I got full of a little bit of hubris when I got the healing word of God. I just turned my back on treatment for about a year and a half. I wouldn't even go get a scan. I was just in Bible study all the time, and so my dual modality was I said goodbye to that, and just relied on my faith, and it almost killed me, because the cancer came back, and it ended up forming a big tumor on my right side that wrapped around. I have two ureters, congenital thing, two ureters on my right side connecting my bladder to my kidney, and so it wrapped around that ureter and choked off my kidney. So now I have a kidney on my right side that basically is non-functional. It's like at 8% or something like that. And so that was when I realized that I believe that God wants me well, but I need to use everything in my I need to pull everything out of my quiver, and it all needs to work together for good. But we had to go after that. So we had to, and so what happened was, we went back to MD Anderson. They had some treatments and stuff like that, and then I, because of the pooling of in my kidney, I ended up with sepsis, and so I know. So people, yeah, it's terrible. So anyway, they rushed me to the hospital here in Los Angeles, and the guy comes in, and the urologist comes in, and he goes, "Man, you were really close to just." This is a guy I didn't know, right? And Connie's sleeping on the couch. And that's the other thing about Connie, is that this is during COVID, right? And so they say, "Oh, only one person's allowed." She goes, "I don't think so." So she would she's an Italian from the Bronx, right? And finally she would just wear them down. They say, "Screw it, just come in. I don't care. Stop talking to me." So this doctor comes in, this young doctor comes in, and he goes, "Mr. Tesh, it looks like, there's some serious damage to your kidney, and we almost lost you, And so for Connie and I, it's always Monty Python. So, Connie goes, "Oh, well, that's cast a bit of a gloom on the evening, hasn't it?" And the doctor's like, "What did you just say?" And then we were in another meeting where there was a radiologist who came in and said, "Yeah, so I found this, and I found this tumor, and this is that." And so I look over at Connie and I go, "Oh, honey, it's a Mr. Death. Is it about the hedge?" And people are like, "What are you talking about?" So we've always kept a sense of humor about it, but it's it's gallows humor, if you will.
Yeah, well, working in this field, you got to laugh.
Well, and I had a best friend in Florida who was a physician when I was like 22 years old. It was just my first television job, and he said I was the medical reporter of all things, and so he said, do you want to come on rounds with me? And I said, "Is that okay?" He said, "Yeah, sure, just stand in the back." So we're going around, getting like 10 patients, and I'm looking at the charts over his shoulder, and on 3 or 4 of the charts it said GOK, and I'm like, what Bob, what is GOK? And he goes, "God only knows." I'm like, wow. I said, "Jeez, that's what you guys write on somebody's chart?" That's when I knew how dark. That's when I knew how dark you guys were.
And at least we're honest. But hope is when a patient comes to me, I know their hope is that I'm going to cure them.
Yes,
that want to get all of that disease gone. And our numbers right now are probably about 50% of the patients we see with incurable metastatic disease from all tumors will get a complete response and stay in a complete response for a long time. Uh, but it's not 100%. And so, your hope um, has to be tempered as you go on. And I try and give patients hope in other ways, meaning that if you have you've got a recurrence and we can find some other treatment for you. Well, we can control your pain. We can
Right.
we can give you
Right.
hope that your course is not going to be um, a terrible one, and that you'll have good time. Not necessarily time. That's one of the things that the
Right.
medical profession loses sight of. Said,
Hmm.
I don't want to have a treatment that I suffer till the day I die. I want to have as good a quality of life as possible. And I need, me as a patient speaking would be saying, I need, that to be taken into account.
Right.
If
Right.
you can cure me, then do whatever you want to do. If
Right.
it's
That's
just about
yeah.
extending my life, it's got to take into account that the life I have left has to be
Right.
good.
That's good. That's my physician has said basically the same thing. So for people who end up getting any diagnosis, cancer diagnosis, doesn't even have to be prostate cancer. What's your advice for what do you do in the next 24 hours?
Uh, I think it comes down to very much what you did. It's about marshaling your resources, and that's family and friends. You have people who say, "I don't want to tell anybody."
Right.
Um, you know, Apparently Norm Macdonald did that. He said, "I'm not telling anybody. I don't want anyone to know about what's going on, with my cancer." And But I think that's particularly in position where you can marshal prayer from large numbers of people. If you talk about it,
Hmm.
because you're in that position as an entertainer, then it's doesn't make sense for me not to do it. So I think in that first 24 hours, you really need to marshal your resources, and that's mainly family and friends.
Right.
And then you have to choose, your doctor. Where are you going to go? How are you going to do this? And I think um, uh, there are two roads to go. One road is I'm just going to go to the biggest place, the biggest name,
Right.
and you know, because I trust them because of their name, and I know I'm going to get the best care there. Um, and I think for a lot of people that's appropriate if it gives you comfort. Uh, I would say that you really should do some heavy research, which is what you did,
Yep.
and what Connie did, because the best place may not be. For instance, I'll give you, for instance, we developed this treatment for pancreatic cancer where we electrocute the cancer. And that is proving to increase the uh, uh, time that patients live, but almost doubling it, and taking some patients that are unresectable and making resectable, so potentially, curative. Well, uh, if you go to MD Anderson, Sloan Kettering, um, Dana Farber Cancer Institute, you're not going to get that. It's not going to be offered to you. The world's expert in that, I mean, I used to be, but that's not my area anymore, uh, is the University of Louisville.
Oh wow.
So, I mean, nobody says, I got cancer, got to go to University of Louisville.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, but that's the place that is best at that modality. And so that's why you have to do research. You
Yeah.
have to find your particular cancer, and you have to do research and say, okay, these are the places that do that the best, and so that's where I'm going to go. The other approach is, I don't live in Los Angeles or New York or one of these major places. Um, uh, I want to find an oncologist in my area that I trust, that I feel compatible with. I mean, I tell patients, if you go to an oncologist and you don't like him or her, I mean, you don't get a good feeling about it,
Right.
just keep going. Find somebody you do, because I mean, you wouldn't stick with the guy that said, "Well, you're dead. Just go get your
Yeah.
affairs in order,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
I
we
mean,
and we didn't. Yeah.
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 I mean,
Yeah.
that you needed to go on, and so you have to find somebody you uh, are compatible with. And I also think that it's very, very important that you have someone who is open to alternatives, even if it's something they don't do,
Right.
even if it's something they're maybe not aware of. I've learned some of the most important things in the last couple of years. I've learned from patients. Patients do the research and they bring this to me and they say, "What about this for me?" And I said, "I've never heard of that before. Let me do some research." And we found that with. Are you aware of Lu-177
No.
being used for prostate cancer? This is something you really need to know about. Okay, so I'm talking to you, kind of as a patient. I won't send you a bill. That'll come later. But Lu-177 is a radiation that goes specifically to prostate cancer.
Yeah. No. This is. I'm sorry. This is what Logothetis has been talking to me about, but I
Okay.
didn't know about the Lu-177. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So that's definitely something,
Right.
that was brought to me by a patient almost 3 years ago, before it was ever approved in the United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah.
And
And apparently, you need to actually let this is what the way I was processing it. You have to let the cancer grow a little bit so we can see the cancer. Does that sound right?
yes, yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
and but we started sending our patients. See, when we do the immunotherapy, very often it will markedly decrease the volume of disease. But if a patient doesn't get a complete response,
Right.
we had nothing to offer them. And one of our patients went to this, what is a world's expert. He's been doing this for 8 years now, and so he's got the most experience, literally, in the world in doing this treatment. Uh, and it's just like anything else, John. If you do it more and you get experience, you're going to be better
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um, and so now we use that very often in patients that uh, haven't gotten the complete response, and
Right.
we're having marvelous results. But I learned that from a patient, and
Right.
that patient markedly changed how the other patients in my practice have done. And so, coming back to the reason, you have to have somebody who's willing
Right.
to listen to you and say, "Okay, yeah, let's look at that. Let's see that."
Yeah, because physicians, surgeons, there are people who are very proud of what they've done, right? And so sometimes that hubris can get in the way. I'm not saying everybody, of course, but sometimes that hubris can get in the way of decisions where it's like, no, I haven't heard about that, so it probably must not be effective.
Well, we run into that all the time. Even though we've published our results in a credible place, it was during COVID, so nobody heard about it. Nobody went to the meeting to hear it or see it. And but yeah, I mean
Well,
it.
yeah, and so really, I mean, what I love, obviously, I love bottom lining stuff. Is the real takeaway from everything that we've talked about is it's like what my dad said to me, and I said, no, Dad, I want to be a concert pianist, and he just said, with a scotch in his right hand and a Kent cigarette hanging out of his mouth, in 1958, he goes, well, then do the work. I mean, I said, you don't realize, you don't think that, well, I got a bad medical diagnosis, that there's actually, well, I thought everybody else was going to do the work. Why do I have to do the work? But if we do the work, then there's just more of a chance of a healing, and that means, figuring out what God says about your future, and then figuring out what the best modality is, right?
Yep, and at some point, the one thing we're sure of, and it's an old cliche, we're all not getting out of this life alive, right?
Right, 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 right.
And at some point, as Kubler-Ross tells us, we have to come down to acceptance.
Yeah, I think that's the
Uh,
title. I think that's the title of a. It's either the Doors or Led Zeppelin. I think it's the title of one of their books, which is "No One Here Gets Out Alive," and they were right. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to quote Led Zeppelin in the middle of a prostate thing.
oh gosh. Well, I want to thank you so much for being so gracious. But tell me a little bit about the last thing, and I'll let you go. Uh, Tell me a bit about Tesh TV and
Yeah,
what
yeah,
was
yeah.
this? Was this a progression, or was this an inspiration? Well, God,
Yeah,
let's do
yeah,
this.
yeah. It's both, really. I mean, and I couldn't come up with a stupider name, so it ends up being Tesh TV. Um, but it's funny because what doing interviews and talking to people, and when you're it's well, I mean, you obviously talk to people one on one a lot, but as a TV or radio host, a lot of times you're just talking to a camera, or a microphone. But getting out there and actually playing live concerts, right? And meeting people in a very emotional way. And music does that, especially when you're playing it live. And then not just getting into the bus, but going into the lobby and having conversation. And Garth Brooks, in a long interview I did with Garth Brooks, he taught me how to do that. He can't do it. He's playing in front of 50,000 people a night, but I can. I'm in a performing arts center with 3,000 people, and there are maybe a couple hundred who will show up, who are sick, who want to have a conversation about it. And so a lot of times people say, well, what's your process every day? What do you do every day? How do you stay so positive? How do how do you do, like a lot of different things and things like that. And I said, well, I have a process. And one of it is that every morning I wake up and I get into prayer, but then I also listen to motivational videos that I've made for myself with music from this and spoken word stuff. And then I repeat what they're saying. And then, I have these, interviews that I've done with people in the medical field. My wife does the same thing. And I just put these all together, and that's always playing in front of me, or I'm reading it all day. I'm just marinating in all this stuff. And so, and I say, and I got this from Romans 12:2 in the Bible, which is be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And they go, what is that, renewing of your mind? It's removing, if whatever's coming into your ears, or whatever's coming into your eyes, or whatever you're speaking is not delivering you, then you have to erase it. And it's a constant battle, right? But the scriptures make it clear that without renewing your mind, then you really can't get to the message of what God wants you. He wants victory, and wants you to be more than a conqueror. So I thought, I've got all this material. Why don't I just put it on a platform? And it turned out, like 5-10 years ago, when I really wanted to do this, the technology didn't exist. But now you can build a platform not only with videos, but this thing is just live 24/7. Sometimes it's just me for 2 hours here working and sharing the information that I found. Sometimes it's a live concert. Sometimes I'll just I just have everything right here. I'll just hit live, and I can just start playing. And then I do this thing where I'll play piano, for example, and then just speak. I have a like an electronic Bible right here, and just read scripture. And so it really is. It's sort of a we call it motivation, inspiration, and healing, basically. So it's a platform where at any point you can just dip in. There's an app, and it's also on your I get excited about this. Also, on your laptop, on the internet, you can just dip in at any time and get 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 2 hours of inspiration to move you forward in your life.
It's a great idea, and it's going to help a lot of people. And I'm going to get the app. And so, if there's a royalty of some sort, I'll gladly pay it. And
well, that's the thing that we do, is that we make it, because people are like, wait a second, I can't afford this, whatever. Is we make it pay what you want. So some people just pay
really,
zero. Some people, yeah. It's after all this experimentation, I'm like, I don't really feel like I can share the word of God and share these healing messages and share all this great information and say, wait, what's $19 a month? Which some people charge. So that's what we do. And so people who can afford it, some people pay $30 a month. Some people pay $1 a month.
well, it's interesting. It's very much like my situation. The people that can pay a little bit more, and that allows us to help other people.
Right. Right.
who can't do that.
Well, it's just
So
my honor to be on this podcast with you, and the beauty of this is that it'll be around, and so I know what you mean about wanting to talk about the journey and not about not just about treatments, because if you're listening to this 5 years from now, it may have changed. Well, probably it
exactly,
will change
exactly.
completely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I am very, very grateful, and I hope it's not the last time we talk. But
Well, that's cast a bit of a gloom on the evening, hasn't it?
no. I didn't mean it that way.
I was doing this interview with.
That was poorly said.
It's all right. It's really not. And my brain's going, let's hear this guy wrap this up. Because it's impossible to wrap up these things. Right? You just say, okay, see you, bye.
Yeah.
But I was doing an interview like 2-3 days ago with a Canadian station, and it was live, right? And I'm looking at their feed in a teleprompter that's in front of me, like here, and so all of a sudden there's a timer comes up and it's counting down from like 30 seconds, and then this thing starts flashing. It says time's up, and I started laughing, and the host goes, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "Because that's the last thing that a cancer patient wants to see is time's up." I said, "Please turn that off."
Well, after stepping on it so classically, goodbye.
Goodbye. I'll see you. God bless you.
You too. Thank you. So this is the portion of the show when we talk about hope and hopeful trends in the treatment and management and diagnosis of cancer. These usually highlight early studies or early trends, and therefore give us hope that there will be future advances. Today's topic is about angiodynamics. This was posted on August 12th, 2021. I just found this article recently. It's Angiodynamics receives FDA approval for PRESERVE study. This is an interesting trend in clinical trials, is to come up with the name for the clinical trial that's catchy. So we've got the series of Keystone trials. We've got this PRESERVE study, which if there is another study, they'll call it PRESERVE 2. And so just a trend. So now we've got a PRESERVE study. And Angiodynamics received FDA approval for carrying out the PRESERVE study. So Angiodynamics is a company that produces interventional radiology products for vascular disease, and has a program in oncology for treating tumors. This study is about the nanoknife system for ablating prostate tissue in intermediate risk population patients. So what's a low risk patient? What's an intermediate risk patient? What's a high risk patient? Well, they're testing this in intermediate risk prostate cancer patients. Low risk patient is a patient with low aggressive tumor, but based on a number of criteria, but mainly how the cancer looks to the pathologist. And then we have middle aggressiveness, and then we have high aggressive. So this is for a significant patient population who have medium risk prostate cancer. This is also about focal therapy, an option for treating these patients with this new treatment called the nanoknife system for intermediate risk patients, but focally, meaning you just kill the cancer and you don't have to kill the whole gland. Interestingly, focal therapy was started by yours truly, and we first published that in 2001 in the journal Urology. And interestingly, the nanoknife system also is an invention by yours truly and his long-term collaborator, Boris Rubinsky, and a wonderful businessman and friend of ours called Paul Mikas. So, and I have nothing to do with this study, and I have no financial interest in this at all, but it's interesting to see this come about. It's been a long time. We introduced this piece of equipment. It was approved in 2007. So finally, we're getting to the place where we are going to be able to show its capabilities for treating patients with cancer, prostate cancer, and with a procedure that should markedly decrease the chances for side effects. The nanoknife has been very successful in another area of cancer, and that is in pancreatic cancer. It's been shown to improve survival or time in pancreatic cancer, doubling the survival in patients that can't have their cancer cut out or resected. So it's an effective cancer-killing tool. The question is, in this setting, is it going to be an effective cancer-killing tool? The investigators of this study from very credible institutions, Jonathan Coleman from Memorial Sloan Kettering, and Arvin George from the University of Michigan. Dr. Coleman states, "We are excited to be leading this multi-center trial. We anticipate the results of this study will provide valuable evidence to determine the appropriate use of focal therapy in intermediate risk prostate cancer patients." From the company point of view, they say, "The PRESERVE study represents a step forward in AngioDynamics' investment to develop additional clinical pathways for the nanoknife system. It is our hope that the results from the PRESERVE study will demonstrate nanoknife systems' ability to provide a treatment option for patients with intermediate risk prostate cancer in the United States." So there is a hope for prostate cancer patients that this study will get the approval for prostate cancer patients to get this paid for on a reliable basis if they want this option. And it will be another very important piece of information and proof that the concept of focal therapy is a good and safe one. So hope for the future in terms of prostate cancer treatment and all of those erections that are currently being lost by the other treatments. So this is the portion of the show, the mailbag, where listeners get to send in their questions for us to answer. Ethan in Phoenix, Arizona. My wife was recently diagnosed with cancer and has been given 6 months to live. She has come to terms with her situation and is wanting to spend the time she has left with family and friends. Our children want her to try and seek treatment and fight her cancer. How do I help them understand and respect her decision? Ethan, that is a wonderful question, as well as in its own way a tragic question. I think the most important thing you have to do, and really it's your wife's responsibility for it. I hate to call it a responsibility because it makes it sound onerous, and the discussion can be. But I think that in her attitude, she can convey to your children that she wants to spend the time with them, and she wants it to be good time. She wants it to be time when they can be together, and she's not sick, and she's not um, in a position where she just can't enjoy that experience with them. And so I think if she conveys that to them and they understand, also that they're not, in my beliefs, losing her forever, they're only losing her temporarily in this life, then they'll understand and come around and not only respect her wishes, but also actively take part in what can be a very rewarding and for them going to be an important, memorable experience. If you would like to ask us a question, you can go to GaryOnikMD.com. There is a contact form that you can fill out, and it will send us your question, and hopefully we'll be able to answer it on the air. Thank you for listening to our podcast. I hope that it provided you with some useful information, some hope, and some comfort. Thank you very much.
Sail on, sail on, sailor. Sail on, sail on, sailor.